I noticed a trend, a significant trend back in maybe 2018, 2019, where the wave patterns shifted. The wave patterns meaning in all markets, not just mine, but really across the globe. I just saw this shift happening in the wave patterns of markets. And that's doesn't matter what you're selling, software, services, or coaching. There was this not major change, but a major shift in the wave patterns. So I'm a sailor. I've been one for years, and one of the things that you learn when you sail on a lake is you don't have, like on the ocean, consistent conditions. So in on a lake, in one race, you can go from one weather system to another. This felt like a shift in the pattern of the wind and the waves on Lake Michigan, which normally has prevailing winds from the city. So it'd be southwest out onto the lake, and then it shifts north a lot. And sometimes it'll sort of hang out east for a little while and west, but it doesn't tend to stay there. And what I noticed by analogy would be a real serious shift in a we call oscillating but persistent wind shift, which means the winds is shifting, but it's also oscillating, meaning going back and forth within the shift. When you're racing a sailboat and you miss that, it's not going to go well. Not going to go well. By analogy, same for being an entrepreneur, self-employed of any kind, a coach or a service provider. If you work for a company, you keep getting a check, but you may not get that check much longer with these oscillating, persistent shifts. I can almost guarantee that in seeing this and noticing this for it's been years now. I started seeing this 2017, 2018, even back in 2016. And I'm like, there's a shift going on. And I'm getting on top of this because this could be the biggest opportunity in history in this modern age to get out ahead of this and create a new sort of company. And that's when I started doing it. And now I'm looking years later and I see something else. And this is not a sea change. This is not a shift. This is not a shift now. This is a sea change. That's what I see. I don't know what you see. I see a sea change. I see as big a shift in how we're going to live in societies globally as we saw at periods like when electricity started, automobiles, and the age of big industrial combinations, steel, railroads, and oil. Even bigger than that, even bigger. You go back further, sea change in thinking. Now I'm talking about the West now, not the East. That's a whole nother thing. And I'm going to get to that. And we're going to get to telling the truth in your market, how to share from experience what's really happening in your market. And that leads to market authority. And we're going to talk about that. And the options. There's two options: opinion projecting or liberation mechanics. I don't see any other options right now. If you do, let me know. And I'll look at them. But I haven't seen any. And I'm looking. I've been looking for a long time. Because I want to win big. I want to thrive in this environment, and I want to make an impact that lasts. So let's go back a little bit more. Descartes, France, philosophy. All of a sudden, this new idea. I think, therefore I exist. Cogito ergo sum. Everybody was like, oh, that's a good idea. Why? because people were stuck in religious confusion at that time. So they were emotionally disconnected from reality of direct observation of the world around us, disconnected from it. When did this start? I don't know, Renaissance era. We're talking about Western now. Eastern's different. We're talking about Western. And I'll get into Eastern in a minute because they connect. That's the exciting part. Now, these are just my observations. I'm not a historian. I'm not an expert. So I don't claim to know truth here around history. No idea. I'm just saying this is what I observe in a way that's useful for me so I can create what I want. And I've known what I've wanted for a long time. And I want it, and it's going to happen because it's what I want. So I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I've never met an entrepreneur who wasn't like that. And if you're not like that, you're maybe not an entrepreneur. You're more like somebody who just wants a job, or maybe you want to just be a coach and help people, or maybe you just want to be a service provider and do good work. You're not an entrepreneur in the same sense. These things connect, though. So I don't know what anybody is, and these categories in some ways don't even matter. It's just, you know what you are. And if you don't, you better know soon, because you're going to get crushed in this sea change. Crushed. It's not going to stay the same, whatever you got going on. I don't care who you are. Because this is when something this big happens, you got to adapt. The only constant is change. People say that all the time. I see these quotes and I'm like, why aren't you changing that? You're doing something that was created like 20 years ago still, or 5 years ago, or last year. When you have a sea change, not just a big shift, everything is different. You have to reinvent. How do you reinvent? We're going to get into that in a minute, because this is a different kind of reinvention than I've ever seen, at least for me personally. Maybe it's different for you. Curious to get your thoughts. So we're going back to the Renaissance in the West. We're going back to where'd that come from? Ancient Greece, the Stoics. I've read a ton of it, Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus, and the idea of reason. Reason's truth. Reason is access to truth. It's incomplete. So there's flaws in it. So in ancient Greece, they figured out some stuff, but they had a lot of flaws in their understanding. So the limitations of Stoic philosophy are now obvious. But there's a shift, big shift. So there's the West. Now we've got native cultures. What did they know? They knew energetic truth. They didn't have reason in the same way. They had reason in terms of folk wisdom of understanding how the world works and how to set up a society and a culture. They'd figured that out from back in the beginning. The native shamanistic or griot in Africa kind of, or the Aboriginal thinkers in Australia, the societies, not thinkers, societies. North America, natives, folk in Celtic mythology, the Vikings, the Genghis Khan, all that stuff. Well, that's a little different. So I don't want to get into that. That's too confusing. That'll be too confusing. So now we got that going on. Well, what happened to that? It got crushed by the rise of cogito ergo sum, crushed by history. There's a reason for this, I think. I don't know. I'm not an expert in this. This is just my observation. And it matters to me because for me to get out ahead of this and create the business and life I want, I got to pay attention to the market or it's not going to work. Sea change, shift, different strategy if you're an entrepreneur, like really different. If I'm on a race course and there's a shift with oscillations within it, I'm making certain decisions based on that. If there's a sea change where the prevailing winds on the ocean, I didn't sail on, I did a big ocean trip, but mostly Lake Michigan. Now, how I approach the body of water is completely different. If it's an onshore breeze all the time pushing me back to the beach and I have to tack to get out off the beach, if I'm launching, I have sunfish now, but I've had lasers and vanguards and other boats, launch on, well, you don't launch a vanguard off a beach. That's not going to work, but you launch a laser, a sunfish, something like this off a beach and you get pushed back on the beach, and it's a different skill set than if the wind's blowing out. That's a offshore breeze. Offshore breeze, you don't want to tip over when you're going downwind off the beach because you can't put the centerboard or the dagger board down fast enough, so the boat slips sideways. That's a whole nother skill set. I've screwed up both of them long enough to know that you better develop that skill set or you're going to have a nightmare life when you get out of the, well, you won't be able to get out on the lake even. And everybody on the beach is looking at you and saying, you don't know how to sail that boat, do you? And I've had a long period of time of people say, you don't know how to sail that boat, do you? I'm like, yeah, I'll figure it out though. And I don't care if you're laughing at me. I'm going to keep going. This is called being an entrepreneur. So knowing that for years, let's say Lake Michigan, Dempster Beach, Montrose. I've been, well, Dempster Beach and Evanston, but I had a boat at Montrose, but we launched it differently. That's the point. Every time I shifted boats or crew assignments and different boats, I had to relearn from scratch. But I already had the basics. I know how to sail. I know how to race. I'm not great at it, but I love it, so I did it. And I kept leaping into the unknown of the next thing that often I could not do for a long time well, or even at all. But I did it anyways because I wanted to. That's entrepreneurship. I don't notice the conditions, the harbor, and the unique type of boat or skill sets. When I got into the Vanguard fleet at Montrose, those are two crew. It's a driver and a crew. That makes it harder. And that boat's fast, really fast, and it tips over. And I won't go into all the stories, but I was the only one in that. Well, there's a couple of people who were as bad as I was from big boats, big boat, keel boats, where the boat doesn't tip over. It's totally different. Your crew, I'm not driving the boat. I'm not in charge of everything, making sure I don't tip over, like all that stuff. I'm using this as an analogy, folks, not talking about sailing. Talking about sailing as a metaphor for life. I was taught by we call them the old man. This guy knew sailing and he taught. I learned the fundamentals of sailing and I was there all the time for years, like a maniac. That's an entrepreneur. Dive in, do the work no matter what. So the idea of productivity, accountability, mindset, it doesn't mean anything to me. It does to some people, though. They need that to get moving. I need to slow down. I need to pay more attention. I need to notice sea shift. I need to notice shifts. And I need to notice sea changes. So when I moved the boat to Dempster, I had a laser. Well, that was in Montrose, but I had the sunfish at Dempster. All of a sudden, I got to figure out, how do I get this boat off the beach? And I learned how. But you better pay attention to, like, no, I'm not at Montrose anymore. I'm not downtown at DuSable Harbor in the city. It's a different thing. It's a different kind of boat. We're there now. In my observation, you may see it differently. So what's going on in the East? They figured it all out years ago in India and China. They were there, like all of it. The Vedic period in India, the period of Lao Tzu, the period of they had integrated mysticism with folk wisdom, as well as had an understanding of how to build a society and a culture, but sort of, because not everyone was there. So if you read about the Shaolin temples, and I've done a lot of this stuff, I don't just read about it, I do it. Those practices of ancient martial arts, and I do that. I've been doing it for 30 years, so I do understand it experientially. That's how they lived, experiential understanding of the world, reality. That's why that stuff works, because it's reality. It's access to reality inside. Reality's inside, not out in the world. Out in the world is a projection of what's inside. That's true. There's things that are true. Our society doesn't quite understand this very well yet. Well, we will, because that's evolution. We're going to. You don't have a choice. This is coming, whether you like it or not. We're going to be on new beaches and new kinds of boats that no one even knows about yet. But we do know, because it's a repeat of what already existed, but in a new form, because we're not going backwards. So what did you have back then? What happened in the East? They wanted to be more like us. If Taoist thinking, if Vedic philosophy, if all of that, it's imbued in their culture. It's just there. That's how they think. It's paradoxical thinking instead of just direct linear, this or that, either or, trapped in my opinion projector mind thinking. They're thinking in circularity around dualities. It's different. It's the opposite. I can do both, so I understand the difference because I've been doing it for so many years. Both. And we're going to talk about both in a minute because it gets you different results. Now, are they losing that in the East? It's in the culture. You can't totally lose it, but they don't care, a lot of them, from what I've noticed, because I see people in countries in Africa where they understand connection, they understand family, they understand how to work together. They just in their culture. They don't even know what they have because they look at the social media and they're like, wow, we want the boats and the money. And of course you do. And you're going to get it. That's what I think is going to happen. As these things start to come together, these are streams of history that are coming together. I don't think we've ever seen this before. It's unbelievable. What is it? What happens? What's in the way? Fear. Most of humanity is terrified of this change. They're resisting it. That's why we have these debates and divides. In my observation, am I right? I'm telling the truth in the market because this is what I do. It connects to my business. Because I want to have a big, serious company that makes an impact. I want to win in the market, and I want to have what I want. So, how to share from experience what's really happening. Your version of this will be useful and get you where you want to get. Can't copy me, though. That's the point. What did they know in the East? They knew reality. What are we doing now? We're stripping their traditions without understanding them and creating basically a technology version of it that isn't real. Now, it has components of real in it, which is good and useful in progress, but that's not the sea change. That's just shifting conditions. Big shifts, though. So all of a sudden now people understand ayahuasca. They understand biohacking in the body. They understand breath. They understand mindfulness, but they don't in the same way that they do in India, in native cultures, and in China. However, as those countries modernized, they lost the tradition, the connection to it, but not all of them. So it's still alive and it's in the culture. People can't even see it. It's just there. We don't have that in the United States. Europe, you have a little more of it from the folk wisdom. It's different. But the United States has an advantage, which is we're really flexible. But some things have got to change. Have you noticed? So what is it that's coming? What has to change? It's the intersection of these three streams. For the first time in history, globally, in an online environment where everybody sees everything instantaneously, what does that do? It's an accelerant. What does that give you? A massive opportunity. Massive. So there's two ways to take advantage of the opportunity. And this is what really matters here. So this is what really matters, is making your decision. So I'm going to read what I wrote in the about section. The idea that truth doesn't exist comes from confusion. Some people are really confused. Have you noticed? The issue, this is what creates the confusion, is when an opinion projector, that's cogito ergo sum, that's someone who believes the mind is everything. What are they doing? They're projecting their opinion and creating a reality from their opinion that's not real. That's what they're doing. Is that my opinion? You decide. When an opinion projector decides what's true for me and tells me how to think, that's a projection. Learn how to avoid being one of them. Who's an opinion projector? Anybody who thinks they know the answer for the world, for themselves, for me, or for anybody who's convinced with not clarity and confidence and certainty, but I mean convinced. They're attached to that belief. They know. And I'm going to tell you now that I know because I'm special. That's the difference. Opinion projector is when the belief in specialness has overcome the knowing of reality, which is, I don't know. How I don't know how it works. I know what I experience in terms of how it's useful to me, meaning reality, my mind. Well, let's go back. So we got these three streams. We've got this rash and reason stream. Like, wow, I can actually use my mind and not be overcome by emotionality and religiosity. That's useful. Okay, we got that. We're there now in this modern world. That's not confusing for people. People are like, yeah, science, technology. Google just invented a processor chip that's going to eliminate the entire software industry, I suspect. I'm not an expert in software. But I look at that and I'm like, those jobs are gone. And people are like, oh, learn how to code, learn how to code. Code's the scalable platform. No, I don't see that happening. That's the sea change, not the shift, the sea change. Like, done overnight. It feels like it's years. What's the other stream? Native culture, this understanding of living in everything that exists as a being a part of it, not extracting from it, being in it, interbeing, connected into nature is what those cultures had all figured out. We can't go back, but we can take that in the modern world and intersect it with our knowledge from mind, cogito ergo sum. But that's wrong because, again, that's my perspective. I'm not attached to that belief. I just feel like that's right from my thinking and observations of stuff I've been thinking about since I was 5 years old and then doing so I could create my own life so I don't have to work for anybody or take money from people and lose control over my business. That's hard. I don't want anybody to give me money because then they own me. And I don't want to have a service business with a couple of clients that own me. And I don't want an investor so I can cash out someday because then they own me. Liberation is the core value for me. It's not a value. It's me. It's what I want. You decide. That's the point. So you have these choices. So the third stream is kind of everything. It's like a real understanding of how the emotional system works, how the thinking system works, and how the energetic system works, intersecting together in a scientific methodology that's true, using the mind as a thinking device for skeptical questioning. So that's what you get from Buddhism and the Vedic traditions, and until somebody believes in them. Here's the truth. I found it. You can have it. Now it's not real anymore. It's the doing it that's real. And anybody who does it and knows it knows that. If you don't know anything about it. It's just a belief. So the role is now releasing yourself from the prison of the belief. That's the work. So where are we today? We have a choice. I can be a marketing opinion projector. And that's really important to understand. So marketing's not bad. It's just a choice. Being an opinion projector is not bad. It's a choice. What is that? It means I'm focusing on what works in the market, not who I am and what I want and why it matters. I'm in the market and I'm trying to figure out, how do I get something out of this place, the world? That's cogito ergo sum. That's I think, therefore I am, so now I get. That's missing connection to nature and reality. And it's completely missing an understanding of how these systems all connect together with scientific, reasoned thinking intersecting with it. So there's no limits in these older traditions, Taoism, Vedic, or what's the other one? I guess that's, I forget. But, well, Kabbalah has this, it's complete. Now, this has been reformulated for the modern world, so I don't even need that stuff anymore. It's a matter of doing it. But now we've got gene keys, human design, which evolved in gene keys. I mean, I'm going too far with some of this for some of you, but I think it would be helpful. So these things have been intersected now in a new form for us, meaning contemporary people who can think scientifically and transcend the idea of science being a belief system of attachment to the science. Then you can't think anymore. You're an opinion projector again. Marketing yourself to get people to understand it through your opinion pounding. And then someone else has an opinion. Let's fight over our opinions. Well, you have to market to do that and sell, because you have to convince somebody who opposes you. Nobody in these native cultures would do that because it's not real and they know it, because you're not connected into nature and each other. There's an idea of each other. And Africa, I think they figured that out a long time ago and still have it. But, they want money and structures and systems, and they're working on it. But they haven't lost that connection. And I don't think they can, because it's them. I just don't think sometimes they know they've got it. I'm not an expert in Africa. I've never even been, I've never even been there. I wanted to go live there for a year and it didn't work out. Now, the other piece is taking bits and pieces from these comprehensive systems. It's not going to work. And we know this because it's taken out of cultural context. So people call that cultural appropriation. That's fine. Okay. You're disrespecting somebody. I think it's more, it just doesn't work, because, oh, I don't want to get on a soapbox here, because I want to make what I'm saying useful. Because what I'm saying is, what I have is an understanding of this in a system that allows people to do what I call experience sharing on their own terms. I'm not asking you to follow what I did. No one will do what I did. I've been doing it since I was 5 years old in my own unique way. This is the point. The people who are going to clean up in the next, let's say, 500 years, and we're going to make it because of us, entrepreneurs. We're going to reinvent everything, aren't we? I am, in my little lane, just one little lane. That's all. I don't have to be responsible for everything. I don't even have to know what's going on. I just have to know what's going on with me. Humility and experience become the new currency for the world. That's the rise of the liberation mechanics. You're not going to unplug the opinion projectors who are fighting over beliefs. It's not going to happen. They're going to keep doing it because they can't see it, because they are stuck in that cogito ergo sum era, which started in the 1600s with Descartes. Now, again, I'm not a historian, so the historians are arguing. It's like, I'm using it as an analogy to explain something. And if you want to get into all the details and fight with me over it, you're projecting your opinion on me because I don't care. You see? It's not about the data or the truth of that, because it's not truth. Truth is an inner experienced knowing of reality, because there is a reality. Where is it? We all have access to it in creativity. So I see CEOs. CEOs want to do plant medicine, ayahuasca, and dosing on retreats so they can become creative. And I'm like, the intent is good. I'm not so sure about the outcome, though, in terms of adapting and adjusting in this sea change right now.